Well, it is 7 p.m. It's time to begin our webinar. You all ready for tonight? This is Joseph speaking. I'd like to welcome everyone who is here with us. We appreciate having you here as our audience. This is our 5th webinar in our financial series online educational videos. Tonight's title is Preparing Deaf Youth for Credit and Debt. This is a huge topic tonight because our deaf youth are starting to gain credit experience. And so I'm looking forward to our discussion tonight. I'm looking forward to feedback and input from all the folks here. Now, of course, before we begin, we want to make sure that everyone does have access via the Zoom software or program. If you would like to have sound on, we do have interpreters voicing the sign language. You can make sure your sound is on if you would like to hear that tonight. As well, we have a live captionist here tonight. There is a closed caption button towards the bottom of the menu on the Zoom window. Click on that and it'll turn on for you. So if you have any issues with those settings tonight, please type into the chat box. We do have staff here ready to answer your needs. And I want to also take the time to introduce ourselves. Again, like I said, I am Joseph Santini. Now, I am the Director of Instruction at the Laurent Clerc National Deaf Education Center. And tonight, my guest panelist is Harish Ramu. Harish, do you mind saying something about yourself?
Sure. Hello, I'm Harish Ramroop. I work at USAID as a financial management specialist. I think I've been there almost 10 years now. Yes, at the end of this month, I will have made it officially 10 years. Yeah, thank you. It's been a great experience working for USAID. And before that, actually, I graduated from RIT with an accounting degree. And straight after graduation, I started working at USAID. I've worked in several different positions there, and now this is my 4th position that I'm in, working as a financial management specialist for the Bureau of Latin America, focusing on the Southern Hemisphere, providing financial resources for those countries in the Southern Hemisphere.
Wow, it seems like you're tasked with a lot there. Now, you're also a parent yourself, right, Harish?
Yes, I am. I'm a parent of 3 kids. Thank you for bringing that up. My second child is deaf and attends school at Kendall. That's one of the reasons I decided to volunteer and serve as treasurer for Kendall PTA, Kendall's Parent Teacher Association. I'm on the board there. It's my 2nd year now.
Well, congratulations, Harish, and thank you so much for being our guest panelist tonight. I know you feel a sense of joy for sharing your knowledge, and you have a sense of excitement for sharing your ideas with our community tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and also we have our amazing CSD Learns team. You can see in the picture on the screen. We've got 4 folks in the background making this webinar happen tonight. And last, we also want to extend our gratitude to 2 organizations. One is CSD Learns. CSD Learns is the online division of Communication Service for the Deaf, and they are providing full support for tonight's webinar. We also would like to thank Hands-On Banking with Wells Fargo Bank. They provide the financial support that make tonight's webinar possible. So we'd like to thank both organizations because without them, tonight's event would not be possible. Again, the goal for tonight's webinar is first, we want to address a need that we've identified across the country. We also want to improve the economic picture for deaf and hard of hearing people. We'd like to support teachers, administrators, parents, social workers, and deaf youth who are interested in financial education. We also would like to create a space where we can come together and learn from each other's experience and exchange the best practices for establishing our children's future financial foundations. Again, tonight we have 4 big goals, 4 main goals. One is to teach youth the basics of credit and debt management, also, and the whys and the critical portions to that. We also would like to bring a knowledge expert to be able to share that knowledge with the deaf community. And we want to give participants tonight a chance to ask their burning questions. And we also would like to share financial education resources and materials with our audience here tonight. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Same here.
Right? Now, before we get moving along with our discussion, I would like to share some facts about credit and debt. And I'll start out with those now. Now, credit can be complex, and for deaf youth coming out of high school and going into secondary education, it can become a trap. There can be improper use of credit, and that could lead to debt, high debt in some situations. And also, with poor credit or a poor credit rating, getting new loans might become difficult. For example, purchasing a car or a home would be difficult, or one would be unable to do that. And so we're going to look at how to address these issues before they come to fruition. Now, Harish, why don't I turn it over to you, and why don't you share some facts as well in regard to debt?
Sure, thank you. You know, I think it's really important to teach students about debt management, and there's three main reasons why. The first is because bad debt can be extremely painful and frustrating, and once you fall into debt, you can feel trapped, almost like there's no way out. So it's very important to teach debt management before falling into that trap. Second reason is because learning how to manage debt can actually create good debt situations for the future, which will benefit your financial growth. And the third reason, I have to say, is probably the most important reason. A government agency did research to see how many classes on financial literacy is being taught to 18 to 34-year-olds, and in 2019, only 17%. That's 4 out of 5 that are missing that crucial knowledge. That's why I feel it's so important that this information is taught and explained. Not only talk about debt, but also talk about credit as well.
Well, it seems like we have a whole host of reasons, Harish, on why we should start introducing credit and debt to deaf youth before they're out of high school. That way, when they come out there, yes, they've got some basic knowledge. I know that MSD, they've got some students with credit cards there, and they're pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go ahead and start tonight's webinar, but before we do, we've got a question for the audience. We're very curious. Do we have parents here, social workers, deaf youth, educators? If you don't mind, when the poll question comes up, please respond. You should be seeing that question now. And Harish, let me ask you, what do you think the makeup of our audience is tonight out of the 4 choices?
I feel there's mostly parents, maybe? Yeah, I think parents.
All right, well, we will see in a moment. Please, audience members, those of you that are here, please respond to our poll question.
I'm wondering who's here.
Simple click, select the description that pertains to you. Okay, and it seems our poll is not working tonight. Question hasn't come up on the screen. I noticed a couple people are typing in the chat, so I see a VR educator here, what we have, and then we see an associate teacher there, administrative teacher, paraeducator, teacher.
Oh.
It's nice to have an administrator.
Okay.
A lot of educators here tonight. Nice, nice. Really cool. We're really glad to have you here tonight. Wait, look.
There it is. There's the poll. I'll go ahead and submit for myself as well. Why not?
Right, go ahead. I'll go and respond for myself as well. Thank you all, you folks who have responded to our poll. Let's give it just a second to see what the numbers look like. Should be able to see the answers on the screen here. Wow, look at that.
Yeah, more teachers than parents.
Yeah, two groups here, pretty much 62% educators, teachers here tonight with us, and 38% parents. We want to recognize that in our comments, that we've got a couple people here that don't fit these categories, like for example, VR counselors. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Cheers to you. Woohoo! This is Joseph speaking. Okay, our first discussion question, Harish.
All right.
And for our participants, if you have any questions, go ahead and type those into our Q&A box so that when Harish and I finish discussing this question, we can go ahead and respond to your questions. Okay, so first question for the night. How do we begin introducing teenagers to credit concepts in school and at home? That's a big question, Harish. Thoughts?
Yeah, when it comes to school, looking back when I was in high school, in my group of friends, if I needed to borrow some money, I'd ask a friend and they'd lend me some money. We did that frequently. And that's kind of the same idea as credit. It's borrowing money from another person. So we did that amongst our friends with a promise to pay that money back. And through that, you develop a reputation for yourself. If you're someone who does not pay your debt back, if you come up with excuses or try to escape paying it back, then automatically you're going to be known as someone with, so to speak, bad credit, someone that no one is going to want to lend money to again. And that word gets around. So that same concept actually applies to credit in the real world. It's basically the same idea. So it takes just someone to point that concept out, that it's very similar in a very informal way. That's not any formal instruction that happens. That's just informal learning through a real life situation. Also, maybe the transition counselor, possibly they could teach a course to students, and also MSSD. I believe they have a transition counselor on staff, right?
They do. Yeah, they do.
Okay. And my high school did not have one, unfortunately. I went to a public school, and all they really cared about was that you passed your classes and you graduated. And they said, bye, and they sent us on our way. But once I entered college at RIT, my very last year before graduating, I had an advisor who told me I needed to take one more general elective course. And so I knew it had to be online because at that time I was living off campus already. So I searched for some online courses and I found personal finance. So I signed up for that course and I really, truly benefited greatly. I learned so much. It covered every single topic you can imagine, from how to budget your own money to mortgages, when you apply for a car loan. It even included how to set up your own business, which I thought was really neat.
That is nice.
I really wish that that course was offered in high school as well as college, but that was a really great course. And then at home, I really think that parents are the key person in their child's life to introduce the concept. The whole idea begins at home with the parents. So when you go to the store, introduce how everything works to your child. Show when you're scanning your credit card at the register what you're doing, and if there was no money in the bank, how you would pay for it. Start to explain, actually I'm borrowing money from the bank by using this credit card, and when we get home, once the bill is due, show the bank statements or the billing statements and say, remember when I made this charge that you see on this line here, that you were with me when we did that and I have to pay that back. Just all of that daily exposure is so crucial. Often parents don't realize how important it is to include their children in this type of information. It's so important that the exposure starts at home and you start to show what spending looks like and debt and all of that. So yeah.
I think that's all great advice, Harish. Let me see if I can recap what you said because you made some very valid and good points. You like the idea of using a natural experience, for example,
Yeah.
an everyday situation for someone young, to get them to understand finances. I remember being young and borrowing money, and people would tell me, hey, don't lend so and so because they're not going to pay you back.
You got it.
Yeah, that's the foundation of a credit system. That's your reputation, your score. So I really like that idea. And I like the idea that all deaf schools should have financial education for their students. With only about 17% of school nationwide
Right.
providing financial education, we have actually a great financial education course at MSSD for junior and senior years, which helps prepare them for that.
That's great.
And yeah, like you said, in family life at home, I agree with you completely on that. Sometimes people grow up with embarrassment around money, right?
Yeah, that's true. Some.
Whether it be cultural background or what. Sometimes we have that sense where it's just uncomfortable to discuss, but
Right.
that's not the best we can do. We've got to model it. We've got to have the conversations, and we've
Open
got to,
communication.
yeah,
Right.
bring in
Yeah.
kids for decisions.
And if you want your child, if you want them to be set up for success, then how else? There's no other way. You have to be the one to share that information with them.
Agreed. That's great advice. So now I want to turn things over to our audience members here. I think I see some questions already in the comments. Let me look through our Q&A box and see what I can find.
Where's that Q&A?
First, that's actually in the chat box is what it seems. It looks like Don, is it Don? What am I seeing here? Okay, want to see the whole name, Donald. Says, as a parent, I show my kids actual bills and show them what are fixed and bills that change every month. And then I explain to them how we have to budget every month. And so that's great. That is modeling to the deaf youth what they have to do so that when they make it to college, they're not surprised and confused. Okay, let me see another question, see what else someone has said. See if I can find the name. Okay, I see there Maya Connors. What I see, okay. And there's a comment there. As a teacher, I've taught students about using their money as a reward for behavior or to pay any reward or gifts. I think that's a great point, especially in elementary school and high school, encouraging students to have an economy where they earn points and then use that to purchase whatever items that come in as a reward. Sometimes it's a candy or a treat, but that does help our deaf youth learn about money and finances.
Yeah, and that I have to mention my oldest daughter who attends public school. They have that same type of reward system, and it's called something like school dollars or something like that. And they actually have an actual store at her school, and different items have different price tags, big ticket items that they all want. So they have to learn the concept of, if you want to spend your money now, you don't get the big ticket item, or save up all of your money and then you can buy that bigger ticket item. So it's a good place to start. It's really, it's never too early to start that conversation.
Right, and our time is short, so we can't stay on this subject for too long, but there are a lot of good comments. We do have to move along, though. Okay, next, here we go. Next discussion question, and let me ask, what should students learn to look for or look out for when they open or choose their first credit card? So let's put some thought into this question. We know that most students or deaf youth get their first credit card probably the last year of high school, or maybe going into college, maybe freshman, sophomore, and they get offered free money. Who wouldn't take free money? So let's think about that. What should they learn in school before they go out in the real world? What should they learn about credit? Harish, what are your thoughts on this? I'm real curious what you think. What should students look out for?
Really, they should look for the best deal possible and as much as they can get out of that one particular credit card. For example, some credit card companies will offer really cool promotions. Like, for example, if you open with me and spend $100 in the first 3 months, you'll get some type of monetary reward, that kind of thing. But always look at the fine print, because the devil is in the details, in the fine print.
Uh-huh.
You always want to look at the APR percentage rate, what the credit limit will be, and what else? Oh, late fees. You want to look for what their late fees are and any penalties. Also, look and see if they have any fraud protection coverage or liability coverage. You want to look out for all of that. And yeah.
Right. For me, as a school administrator, we're talking about two different skills here. One is literacy, reading, right? We've got reading involved. Students have to understand and learn that financial language and vocabulary. Fine print, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Let's start there. That's all the details that the way things are written can be confusing and can fool some people. Another thing is deaf youth also have to have math skills, because you've got to use math to understand and figure out your APR, right?
Oh, yeah, a lot. I've also noticed that credit cards can be a little confusing because of their billing cycles.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you charge up a certain amount and then you pay that the next month, but in the interim, from the time that you charged all of that to the point to where you're paying the bill, you're actually still using your credit card, but you don't see it reflected yet.
Right. I noticed the last question you mentioned transition counseling, and I think a critical part for students who are transitioning is to get real life examples on, like, for example, a credit card application. Let's just sit down with one and say, we got to break this down. This is a credit card application.
Yeah.
Let's go right through it and figure it all out. I know they can be complicated, even for myself. And I'm a school administrator, and I still have a challenge with that fine print or reading those contracts. I could just imagine an 18-year-old deaf.
Overwhelming.
Right. First language, sign language.
They'll probably not even want to read the rest of it. Another thing I was thinking about is calling the credit card company with your video phone and ask questions. If you have any type of questions about the credit card application process, call in and ask what these terms mean and let the representative explain it. So you can always ask questions. Never be afraid to ask.
Right. Completely right. I notice sometimes if you call a credit card company and you ask for a specific thing, they make more offers. And so we've got to learn how to interact and how to dialogue with those credit card companies, because a lot of that has to be taught in high school. Well, let's make good use of our time. So let's turn over to our audience and see if they have any questions or discussion points. I think I see a few. First comment from Maya again. Says it's important to start teaching elementary school students the basic concepts about credit, like, for example, why to use credit, how to use credit, and so on and so on. When is a good time to use credit, and how using credit impacts finances. So I'm curious, when is a good time to start teaching about credit in general? What's the right age, quote unquote? Interesting, huh?
I'm sorry, I missed that question.
Oh, the person's just saying they're not really sure when a good time is to start that financial education about credit.
It's never too early to teach the concept right now.
Agreed. I think the earlier the better, Harish. My sister, my nephew, she's having him make some purchases at Amazon, and he's only 5. He's a really bright kid. He's got it figured out. And so he understands that that represents money.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's too young. 5 is just fine.
You're right.
I see another comment there from Matthew. And Matthew says, are those credit cards with bonuses and perks? They often require moderate to high credit scores.
Yes.
Now, would a first-time person, like a deaf student, getting a credit card be approved for that?
That is a very good question. You're right. You're right. Those types of promotional offers usually are given to people with high credit scores. So, right. It's highly unlikely that a first time user of a credit card would get those. Typically, you'd open up a very basic credit card with a very small credit limit and probably no bonuses or perks or rewards, but just something to get started. Yeah, thank you for that. Good point.
Yeah, I think a great question from our audience members tonight. So thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move along with our next discussion question. Excuse me. Next question actually is a poll question, poll for our audience. And now it's something I've learned that as a parent, you can go ahead and add one of your children to your credit card. That's kind of neat. It can be useful to have a child on a credit card. So I'd like to ask the audience here, would you be willing or should you add your child to your credit card? We've got 4 responses, starting with, of course, no way. We have a not sure and a maybe with limits. And then a 4th, I didn't even know I could. Our poll question will populate on the screen, and if you can please respond to that, we'd much appreciate it.
I wish they had a 5th answer. Yes, I will.
Maybe we'll get that out of the comments, Arish.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm curious, can we have the results posted now, team members? That is an interesting result. The lowest number is not sure with 5%. So it's interesting that our audience has put some thought into this. We have 16% at a no way, never ever. Okay. And then 21% saying, I didn't even know you could. Cool, cool. Last and highest percentage is 58%, maybe with limits. And that's a fantastic answer because there are specific limits that can be set for children's credit cards, right? They can be assigned a certain amount or specific limits like $100, $200, Harish?
Well, one thing, actually, there aren't a lot of financial institutions that will offer that, except the only credit card that offers that is American Express. I actually looked into it, and yes, American Express is the only one that offers the ability to set up a credit limit for your child if they're added as an authorized user.
So if your credit card company is not American Express, then I do know that some parents have bought debit cards, maybe it is.
Yeah.
Would you recommend them doing that technique?
I would add my child as an authorized user for my credit card. I have a high limit on my credit card, and so that I definitely would not let my child use. I keep that to myself, but just let them be as a part of my credit so they can start building their history without actually having a card, just to set them on track for success. And then when they're ready to have their own credit card, I would encourage them to apply for their own. And then they'll have those limits in place. Typically, they'll start with a $200 credit limit, just a very basic credit card. I would encourage that. But I would definitely not let my child use my credit card and have my credit limit be their credit limit, because the sky's the limit there, you know. Yeah, I'd rather not.
Yeah, they'd probably spend $100,000 on an iPhone game if they could.
You're right.
You bring up a good point, though. How can parents help their children build their credit score, right?
Right. Adding them to their account. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. That's one way.
Yeah. And I think there are a variety of credit card companies that do have a minimum age. Some say 12, some have no minimum age. You can add your baby to your credit card as an authorized user right now. And then they will have 18 years of credit history and having done nothing for that. And then they'll be set up in a nice position to apply for their own credit card at 18.
Wow. Well, that leads to our next question, and I think it's a fantastic segue. The next question is, what is a credit rating? And what can kids do when it's time to build up their credit? So, Harish, we just talked about that, setting up a credit card for our children. Do you think it is a good idea to start when they're babies? Would that be your advice?
Well, why not?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, when they're ready to apply for their own credit card, they will get the best offers. They're not going to get those measly, low basic credit cards. So it would be nice for them to start off with good credit already, and they can benefit from those rewards and incentives, but as long as they're using their credit card wisely, of course. It looks like there's an answer. Or
Yeah,
can
go
I
ahead.
answer this?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, well, your credit rating is similar to your credit score. 300 to 850 is the range. 300 is lousy credit. 850 is absolutely excellent. So when it's time for a child to build up their credit, in order to do that, they have to pay their bills on time. Payment history is one of the largest influencers behind your credit score.
Mhm.
They look at payment history, also credit utilization. So for example, let's say you have a credit limit of $500 and on a monthly basis you charge $400 to $450 on that credit card. Creditors consider you a risk in doing that because you're getting too close to your credit limit, especially if you do it too often. It looks like,
You've run it out.
yeah, you have no discretion. And so that will have a big impact on your credit score as well. So my advice is to use your credit card a lot less or ask for a credit limit increase. That way your credit rating will be better if you're using less of it. Also, they look at the length of your credit history. So if you just opened up your credit card, your credit score will automatically be low, and then it will take a long time to build that up. So those with a really long credit history will have a higher score just as a result of that. So yeah, those are the basics.
Okay, two things you said, Harish, stood out in my mind. Was how to give educators help. Well, here's the situation. I know a lot of deaf kids who go to school, they're away at a dorm perhaps. Maybe their parents do provide them a credit card for whatever reason, right? For food access or whatever the reason may be, which is fine. And so now I'm a teacher at a school working with kids. So I'm a counselor, they're transition age. Let's say I am around these students. What should I do? Should I meet them one-on-one, give them advice?
Well, I would put them in the shoes of the bank, so to speak. Say, how do you feel if people don't pay you back on time? Wouldn't that upset you? Wouldn't you be annoyed? You want your money back when it's been promised. If I lend you money, I expect to get my money back when you promise. Same idea. When a bank approves you, you're entering into an agreement. And that agreement is that you will pay me back on time. And then if not, I will charge you with interest and all these other charges. So that's kind of a good way to put it in perspective and help them think twice and not, just be careless about it and not think it's important to pay on time. So I guess that's one way.
I think that's a great response, Harish. I'm actually curious to see if we have any questions from the audience at this point. I do see some comments in our Q&A box, so let me read through those real quick. I see, I'm going to go from the bottom. Someone's saying, and it looks like Andrea says, is it good for a young person to have a credit score that is more than what they've worked to earn? What if they're not a responsible person, quote unquote, even though you've been teaching them about credit? What if they're irresponsible? What should we do? Can we do?
Well, then let them learn the hard way. I
Uh,
mean, that's what I would do. What else can you do? Let them go into the real world and learn for themselves. I've done my part. I've taught you, I've impressed the importance of these things to you, and they will have to struggle and then learn from those struggles, and they can rebuild their credit. Everyone really goes through the same thing, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a tough one for us as educators or as parents to just sit back and watch, knowing more about the consequences. But you're right.
Right.
Sometimes teaching requires an experience for actual learning, either way.
Most important is that they know we'll always be there for them. If they end up needing our help, we'll always be there.
There is another question, and this comes from Matthew. And Matthew asks, credit history is important. And I didn't know you can start a credit history when a person's an infant. But if that credit history is idling for 18 years, would that be an issue if it's just stagnant?
Yes, if you're not using that credit card, then the credit card company will automatically close your card due to inactivity. And they have different terms. Some credit card companies will close your account if you haven't used it for a year, and they'll notify you in advance by mail. So if I was to add my child to a particular credit card, it would be one that I use. That way it'll show up and be a benefit to their credit history.
So you're saying you as the parent would be responsible with your credit for your child, right?
Right.
Nice. Okay. I think I've responded to the questions for this discussion question, so we'll go ahead and move on to our next slide. And I'd like to thank the audience members that are presenting their input there. Thank you so much for your sharing. Our next discussion question is, and I'm just curious, Harish, what should kids learn about as far as credit reports? So, I mean, I don't know if it's right for a baby to start a credit rating at birth. So, I mean, children can have credit scores if it's possible before they even ever get to college. And so credit becomes an important skill. Understanding one's own credit score, it becomes a skill. So how do we get that across to kids?
Yeah, actually, we can show them what a credit report looks like. Typically, they're very long. They're broken up into different categories, such as payment history and number of accounts you have open under your name, your social security number, your credit utilization. All of that is listed out and in a very detailed manner. So the good thing about your credit report is that if you see anything that is not yours, anything that's strange, you can always dispute it. You let them know that that's not yours and show evidence, and they will remove it, and that will have a positive impact on your credit score usually. And then you can use your information, or the information that's on your credit report will actually stay there for 7 years. And so, of course, it's a rolling 7 years. And the 8th year will always drop off. So you always want to think before you do something rash. You know, think, it's not a big deal if I just skip a payment. Actually, it is, and it will stay with you for 7 years.
Right.
So it has a huge impact on your credit score. Oh, and it's free. It's free to download.
Oh, yeah. Don't let me interrupt you. Keep going.
Yes, it is free to pull your credit report. You should never have to pay. You can Google it, and there's many different websites that provide a free credit report. But I do recommend using Credit Karma specifically. Go to creditkarma.com. It's a really neat website. Yeah, very cool. It's extremely user-friendly, easy to read, easy to navigate and understand. It's really nice, cool website.
Now, how old should one be or can be to request their credit report? Is that 18? Is there a minimum for requesting it?
Good question. Huh. I would think that if you have some activity on your credit, it should show up there.
I know a high school group that had everyone in the class, I believe they were seniors, and they all requested their credit report.
Okay.
And then they all analyzed them together as a class project, a class activity. And that was a neat activity.
Yeah. That's great.
Personally, yeah, personally, I learned a lot during that process too. Okay, well, let me check in with our audience, see if you folks out there have any comments or questions for us on this subject or this question. Fascinating. I've got a person here, it looks like Guthrie, saying 7 years credit history. Shouldn't that be reduced for those that are under 18?
Yeah, I think it should be reduced. Definitely, I agree. I feel like 7 years is much too long. If you make one small mistake, it'll have a huge impact on your credit score. So
Right.
yes, I definitely think 7 years is too long.
Yeah.
And I actually just read something a few weeks ago. What was it? Oh, a congresswoman from the AOC. AOC, Alexandria, yeah,
Ocasio. Yes.
Ocasio-Cortez. I love her. Yes, she mentioned that exact thing. She feels like 7 years is just way too long. The Financial Oversight Committee that looks at credit and everything, she said that 7 years should be brought down to 4 years. And I think they're trying to write a bill actually to reduce the number of years because, yeah, it definitely 7 years is too long.
I feel like it really impacts communities of color, right?
Yes, it does. You're right.
Perhaps even low income families. I'm sure it's a lot tougher for them to get
Right.
back on track and rebuild their credit.
Yep, exactly. Exactly right.
Okay, we've got another person here adding a comment just now saying, and it's also 10 years to remove any closed accounts. I don't know if you see that, Harish, just in the chat box.
Uh,
Does that take 10 years to
oh,
remove those
huh.
closed accounts?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Hey, I guess we're all learning something new tonight.
Yeah.
Thanks for the share, Matthew. We got to keep moving on. We're now at our next question. It's 7:42, which means we only have 18 minutes left for our conversation.
Oh.
Great discussion and conversation tonight. So, next discussion question again is, what are the most important things kids can learn before leaving school to avoid bad credit and debt? This question actually came from a conversation with Mark Apodaca. He is at the New Mexico Institute for the Deaf, really neat fellow. And he was talking about after graduating high school, he went out in the workforce, and sometimes uh, going out to the real world and being in the workforce, the person just has no idea and becomes swallowed in debt. Uh, so this happened to Mark. And Mark says he went back and got that financial education so he could avoid that. So let me ask you, what should be included in that transition time when kids are leaving high school?
I think the number one thing that needs to be taught is how to budget, how to add up and identify your expenses, add up your income, and money coming in and money going out, and having that set up and written down, knowing exactly when your income will come in, when your bills are due, and how much you'll be left with at the end of every month. It's crucial that students learn how to budget their money. Once they have that in place, then they will start to see for themselves where they're spending their money. And then maybe they can analyze why they're spending their money on certain things. And they'll actually start to learn more about themselves and their lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
which will then lead to, a larger picture as far as figuring out what they want from life, what their goals are, what their passion is, and it all comes back, if you have this grand goal in place, you have to step back and think how you can adjust your budget and make smaller steps to achieve that goal. So that's why it really starts back with budgeting. And that should be taught during, the transition period in a transition class, just very basic budgeting skills. And, have them lay out what their rent is, what all their total expenses are, so they can see that total and then what's left, and have them figure out what they're going to do with that money. So having them learn those budgeting skills will set them up to thrive in life. Not only that, but I think it's also key as well that they do some research.
Research.
Yeah, say they want to buy something. How will they know they're getting the best deal?
Hmm.
What if they see something online, that same thing online, and it's $50 cheaper? Take the time to research your options uh, in all the ways possible. I think research is key as well. I'd say those two are the most important,
Right, right.
in my opinion.
Yes, I agree completely. To your first point, self-awareness. Wow, right?
Yeah.
Extremely critical for two reasons, really. I'm thinking about when kids get money, do they really understand what it means? Right? Money represents or is a symbol of work. Someone's had to chug away to get that money. And sometimes kids don't see that. They see a shiny plastic magical card that they can
Right.
swipe and get things. So that's a lot to take on. But backing up to budgeting and being able to put that down on paper and separate it and understand where the spending is, I think leads me to number two is that decision making. Very important what you're going to spend your money on. That's a decision to be made there. Now, I have a friend who has a niece that went ahead and I think your kids might be like them because you remind me a lot of her parent. At 5 years old, she decided she wanted to save money for college. Big goal at her,
Wow,
that age, 5.
that's good.
Yeah, and she actually showed me in her diary. It's something real. So when she was about 8 or 9 years old, she started doing chores. Right, she kept going and she started babysitting. And that money she never spent on candy. Right, other kids typically buy candy or clothes or whatever. All she did was save her money. She graduated high school, and at that point, she had about $1.5 million saved up.
What? Wow,
she self-paid for her college,
that's
and
amazing.
she didn't have to work at all while she was in college. She had a great time, really enjoyed herself. And so just seeing her experience, just all I can do is honor her and honor her story. And
Wow.
that comes from her having that self-awareness and knowing herself. And that started for her really young.
Wow, very ambitious person, obviously.
Very. And now at elementary schools, they've got the Common Core Standards, which is asking us to do the same thing, to ask students to envision their future, to ask them what type of job they want in the future, what type of home they want in the future. And really, we're laying out the foundation for their own future. And so high school, too. I think high school teenagers don't always make the best decisions for themselves. They're so young, so eager sometimes. And I'm curious to see what our audience thinks about what it is that kids need to learn and understand about bad credit and debt and how to avoid it. Okay, it looks like Maya Connors, going back to our discussion about a credit score, is curious, saying, where can I find examples of real credit scores for kids to read? Huh. Harish, any idea?
I guess you can start with Google. Just Google a sample credit report. I guess that's
Okay.
a good place to start. I'm honestly not sure.
You're probably spot on, Harish. Google just sample credit report. I know some teachers that bring relatives credit reports. They just mark out people's names.
Yeah.
uh, Maybe that's something that can be done.
That's true.
Or also reaching out to a credit card company and saying, hey, do you have a sample credit report?
Yeah, yeah.
Want to
There
show
you
what
go.
credit scores look like on the reports? Also, I want to mention that a lot of banks nowadays do provide financial education online. Bank of America, Wells Fargo do. So if you visit their websites, you can see a list. They do teach about credit, and they do have example credit reports there. Of course, you'd have to go in and search and find it. We will add a link to this PowerPoint so that when it's shared, it does have that link on there. We've got to move on to the next question at this point, folks. Now, this question focuses on pitfalls. And the reason for this question, And the question, of course, being what are some pitfalls that young people should be taught to watch out for when taking on new debt situations, like loans? Now, again, the reason for this question is because there are a lot of 18-year-olds that do apply for student loans, right?
Yeah.
And again, from the first day they go into education, they're already in debt.
Yeah, you're right.
What's your warning for these students? What advice can you give them? What should they do, Harish?
I would advise them to not jump on the very first offer or deal that they get,
Uh-huh.
but to make sure they explore all of the options. See all of the options out there and then choose the one that is the best and proceed with that. Because, impulse buying is really dangerous.
Right.
What if, the loan that you get is actually really, really bad and then you're stuck in it? And
Mm-hmm.
it's also a huge decision that could have really long-term financial impacts. So as I mentioned earlier, research is very important. It would be good to have a good research foundation and just be willing to take the time to explore and look and find the best options. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I also wanted to say one more thing.
sure.
One cool thing about Credit Karma
Uh-huh.
is they have a credit score simulator. So you could, type in, like, let's say, what if I took out a loan for $50,000? What would happen to my credit score? If you're really worried about your credit score, they have that feature where you can go in and just kind of test things out to figure out if that decision would be worth it, worth the risk or not. So I think that's one really cool feature you can use.
Yeah, that is a cool app to use in class. Now,
Yeah.
in regards to your suggestion about research, which I always recommend to students, uh, limited research, right? What I mean by that is telling them I can go to different websites, right? And go find, for example, 4 or 5 different loan offers, right? And what I do is I'll place them in a folder. I'll present them to the students. And then I'll ask the students to only use those 4 sample interest rates uh, for their research. If I send them off to find interest rates on their own, right, they'll be gone forever. So
That's true.
what I do is I find about 4 to 6 loan offers, and then I have them research that. And then once they get beyond that and they've got more of a foundation, then I let them work on their own. But in the beginning, uh, right, I've got to provide them the material for them to get their feet wet.
Yeah.
That's one way to work.
Okay. Yeah, got you. Well, that's a good way to start building their research foundation too.
It sure is.
That way they know what to even look for.
Right. We also have calculators online that help, but of course, we'd rather have the students learn to do math on their own. But that might not be their strength, right? They might have another strength. Like, for example, we have APR calculators online. We have interest calculators online. There are various tools online that can help students find the information. And so we have them search for those tools so that they can apply them in their life as well.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to include the audience because I believe we do have comments populating. Let me go ahead and look at the Q&A box. We do have Andrea making a comment. So she recommends people try a program called YNAB. You Need a Budget. She says it's a subscription, but it's free for students. Subscription-based program. And I have not seen that before. Have you seen that before?
No.
And that's what's really great about this webinar is it's not just us unilaterally putting out information. We got information coming back to us as well.
That's true. We're always learning.
We sure are. And then another participant, Elizabeth Bull, mentioned that VR counselors can also get trained for financial empowerment program called Your Money, Your Goals, which Consumer Money Protection Group offers that. So thank you, Elizabeth. Really neat. Thank you for sharing that link. And then there's another comment from Matthew. And Matthew says we need to teach students about soft and hard pulls and about borrowing and interest rates. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, sure. So when a credit check is done, typically it's called an inquiry on your credit report. And if you have a high number of inquiries on your report, it looks like you
Oh,
are a risk. It means you're going out and asking everyone to lend you credit. So that could be one of the pitfalls, yes. However, inquiries have much less impact on your credit score. It's not as much of an impact as if you missed a payment or if you're overusing your credit card, for example.
I
But
see.
yeah, it could be one of the pitfalls for sure.
It's important to know when, but yeah, really, there are a lot of topics that we have to teach young people about debt and credit. And really, there is curriculum presented by Wells Fargo. They offer their hands-on banking curriculum, and you can download those courses. They are free, and they have uh, quite a bit of ideas to share with the audiences. And then Matthew, Andrea, and Elizabeth, I'd like to thank you for your participation tonight as well. Okay, we're going to have to wrap things up for tonight. We're at the last slide, and we only have 4 minutes left. I feel it's been an incredibly good conversation and discussion with you, Harish.
My pleasure.
Now, for the next part, we can work together to make a single-page resource as a resource with various pieces of resource on it, and we can share those resources. We do have some already. I'd like to share Next Generation Personal Finance. They have curriculum for online learning, and it's a great resource for teachers and educators if you're looking to involve more curriculum. And we also have CSD Learns financial tips on YouTube, which is really neat because there are different videos on financial tips there. And then we have Wells Fargo, which I mentioned before. They have a complete curriculum on building credit fundamentals. Again, worth the folks' time here if they'd like to take a look at that. And then there is another program called FamZoo. Are you familiar with that, Harish?
No, I've never heard of it.
Okay, well, FamZoo is a website that teaches students about prepaid credit cards. It's financial education, so they can go ahead and purchase a credit card, and they can go ahead and then go through the website and use that credit card through the website and get their
Oh,
experience that way.
that's cool.
Yeah. There's also 2 other apps that we recommend as resources, and one is Mint.
Yes.
Yeah. Mint is fantastic for learning how to budget because
Yes,
it
it is.
adds your bank account and it tracks your spending. So that way you can be presented with an analysis of your spending and you can see where most of your spending is going. Let's say, for example, food, which is my biggest category of spending. And then Credit Karma, that program that you had mentioned before. Have you used those apps, Harish?
Yes. Oh, yes. I still use them, and I love Credit Karma. It's very easy to navigate, very user friendly, and I really like their simulator as well.
Uh-huh.
It helps to give me an idea of what type of activities will really impact your credit score.
Neat. I have to admit, I have not used that app
Oh, I
yet.
recommend it.
I'll download it right after tonight's webinar.
All right.
Wrapping up tonight, I do want to mention our upcoming webinar, which will be in May, which will be our final and 6th webinar for this series. And the topic for that webinar is starting a business, entrepreneurship, and the deaf community. I know that there's a lot of deaf folks that want to start their own business, Harish. And so we'll have 2 business owners present their experience in school and what helped them benefit as a deaf business owner. Basically, that wraps it up for tonight. I'd like to thank Harish again. Thank you, everyone in our audience as well. Everyone here. Feel like it's been a fantastic discussion.
Yes.
Remember, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted at the CSD Learns website. I'd like to thank all you folks here tonight. Have a wonderful night.
All
Goodbye.
right. Thank you.